So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today, both here in person and over Zoom. My name is Shahrabi, and I'm joined by my co-chair this afternoon, Richie. We're both organizers with Bronx Anti-War, which is a Bronx-based organization of working class people of color who are staunchly anti-imperialist. We stand in solidarity with all oppressed peoples and nations that resist imperialism and strive for self-determination, national liberation, and sovereignty. At Bronx Anti-War, we believe that political education is a necessary part of our struggle, and without it, we fall victim to imperialist propaganda, co-optation, and state deception. And we would like to take a moment to thank the organizations that endorsed and helped put this event together, including Workers' World Party, the New School Alumni for Palestine, the United National Anti-War Coalition, and Black Intifada. And a special thanks to Workers' World Party for hosting us here in person this afternoon. And for our viewers on Zoom, please note that in the chance that Zoom shuts us down, please check your email and our social media pages for updates. You should be receiving a new link within 5 minutes, and the meeting will go forward. So today's panel is designed to address and unpack the contradictions that we see here within the Palestine Solidarity Movement. These contradictions are especially visible here in New York City, but they are reflective of broader issues throughout the West. New York City is often regarded as a hub of revolutionary consciousness. However, the reality is that there are major pitfalls and failures that significantly undermine our political efforts. One of the clearest examples of these contradictions was the response to the fall of Syria. After the US and Zionist-backed coup, some groups in the Palestine Solidarity Movement chose to remain silent, and others actively cheered on the so-called revolution. What we see now, however, is that this was a grave mistake. The new regime in Syria, led by HTS, is normalizing relations with the Zionist entity, ceding land without resistance, committing massacres against Alawites, Shias, Christians, and other minority communities. It is also dismantling Palestinian resistance factions operating within Syria, and just recently this included the arrest of leaders from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now that the truth is becoming undeniable, we must ask ourselves, how do we reconcile this? How do we learn from this failure? This moment shows that imperialist propaganda is very sophisticated, and many of us are not thinking critically enough. If we do not understand the Palestinian cause within a broader regional and global context, we risk falling for and aligning ourselves with the same imperialist propaganda that undermines the cause again and again. These contradictions have been apparent at our actions that we, Bronx Anti-War and allies, have organized. For example, following the fall of Syria in December 2024, we organized a demonstration to denounce the regime change operation. And at this demonstration, we were attacked not only by Zionists, but also by those who claim to be anti-Zionists. One person attempted to snatch and rip a banner we held, which included all the flags of the nations in the axis of resistance. This was a coordinated attack that was used to film and create propaganda against us, including a Twitter post that falsely portrayed a Turkish hijabi woman as a brave Palestinian woman speaking against us. This was an orchestrated and deliberate attempt to weaponize identity politics against our work of defending the sovereignty of Syria, which was formerly the backbone of the axis of resistance. It is a concrete example of how identity politics can be used to undermine solidarity with the resistance, and why we must think critically about how propaganda operates. Reactionary diaspora exists, and we must recognize that many of those who find themselves in the West, but from nations targeted by US imperialism, often hold reactionary views that align with Western imperialist narratives. This reality is something we need to unpack and address if we are to build a stronger and more principled movement in solidarity with the resistance. And another example of these contradictions is the backlash we face after organizing a vigil for the martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the former Secretary General of Hezbollah. We were attacked not only by Zionist groups like Beitar, but also by prominent US-based Palestine Solidarity groups who accused us of, quote-unquote, glorifying terrorists. This is a major contradiction that must be addressed. How is it that these groups can make such disgraceful claims against those in South Lebanon who opened up a resistance front against the Zionist entity the day after the heroic Al-Aqsa flood operation began? How is it that they can tarnish the sacrifices made by those who have given their blood, their family, and their lives for Palestine? This is a disgraceful and shameful erasure of the resistance of the very people who are leading the struggle for liberation.
Listening directly to the resistance is critical, yet many Palestine solidarity groups in the West refuse to do so. They like to use the term resistance for aesthetic purposes, but they do not actually engage with or uplift what the resistance says or does. What does resistance mean? Resistance means the armed struggle against imperialism, the operations of al-Qassam brigades and Saraya al-Quds. But the resistance are never named, never acknowledged here in the West. Instead, the narrative in the West focuses on perfect victims, on human suffering, and on loss. Many have failed to acknowledge that an anti-colonial struggle is being actively waged right now, and the heroes and martyrs of this struggle have won real victories and made huge material contributions to the cause. One of the most apparent examples of this contradiction was during the celebration of the ceasefire and prisoner exchanges this past January. This was an enormous and beautiful victory won by the resistance factions and the popular cradle that supports them, who remain unwavering and steadfast. And yet, many in the West did not acknowledge that. This deliberate strategy to exclude the resistance is deeply problematic and must be challenged. How can one say they want a liberated Palestine and at the same time refuse to recognize and acknowledge its liberators? This brings us to our next point, which is the need to address Iran's role within the axis of resistance. Since the 1979 revolution, Iran has enshrined the liberation of al-Quds into its constitution. For decades, Iran has provided material support to the resistance, from weapons to knowledge and strategy. It has helped the resistance in Gaza achieve self-sufficiency by teaching them how to take apart unexploded Zionist missiles and repurpose them. Yet not only are these contributions ignored in the West, but Iran is actively demonized, often due to sectarianism. This erasure is unacceptable, especially when Iran has paid such a heavy price for its solidarity, including the martyrdom of General Qasem Soleimani, sanctions, and US Zionist missile strikes violating its sovereignty. We cannot ignore Iran's role or allow sectarianism to blind us to its contributions. Yemen is another vital member of the axis of resistance, often overlooked by Western Palestine activists. Ansar Allah, the de facto government of Yemen, has long championed the Palestinian cause, dating back to before the 2000s. For nearly 18 months, they have endured relentless bombing due to their unwavering support for Palestine, including ongoing attacks against occupied territories and a naval blockade that has significantly harmed the Zionist entity's economy. Their accomplishments include downing dozens of US MQ-9 Reaper drones and targeting the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier in the Red Sea with cruise missiles and drones. Every Friday, millions of Yemenis march in solidarity with Palestine, showcasing what true commitment to the Palestinian cause looks like. Yet many Western Palestine solidarity groups refuse to acknowledge Ansar Allah, effectively erasing their crucial contributions. As we begin this discussion, our goal is to critically examine these contradictions and situate Palestine within its broader regional and global context. By understanding the dynamics of the axis of resistance and the role of propaganda, we can avoid falling into the traps of imperialist narratives. At a time when the genocide of Palestinians escalates, the very least we can do here in the West is to stand in firm solidarity with the resistance and avoid spreading the occupation's propaganda. Anything less than that is unacceptable.
So without further ado, we are very honored to introduce the following speakers today. First, we have Laith Marouf, who is an award-winning radio and television producer, an international expert on the media rights of indigenous, racialized, and disability communities, and a sought-after political analyst of West Asia and North Africa affairs. He is a media activist and journalist who launched Free Palestine TV to support the resistance against Zionism and imperialism. FPTV broadcasts live reports from the front lines of Palestine and Lebanon and hosts weekly shows on the war for the liberation of Palestine. FPTV's goal is to support the resistance from a media standpoint and to incite free peoples to move and fight Zionism and imperialism wherever they exist, through effective demonstrations and protest movements that go so far as to close military factories, block roads and ports, and sit-ins to paralyze global support for the Zionist entity. Free Palestine TV is one of the few independent and principled channels that is reporting on the ground and that we English speakers can access. I highly encourage all of you to check out the channel after this discussion and to become monthly contributors to their very important work. Next, we have Hamid Shahrabi. He is a political activist from Iran defending the Iranian Revolution against imperialist aggression since its inception. From 1970 to 1979, Shahrabi lived as a political activist in exile, fighting against the Shah's repressive regime. During this period, he contributed as a writer to Students' Message, a weekly magazine in Farsi. In the same period, he also acted as an organizer of the Committee for Artistic and Intellectual Freedom in Iran, CAIFI. CAIFI launched a broad, successful campaign in defense of the Shah's political prisoners, involving reputable figures in the US anti-war movement and resulting in the freedom of a number of those detained. From 1984 to 1990, he was manager of Solidarity Publications, having published, for example, Fidel Speaks, Fidel and Religion, Venezuela Revolution, Nicaragua Revolution, Sandinista Speak. From 2007 to present day, he is co-founder and research director at the House of Latin America, OLA, based in OLA has been involved in activities aimed at deepening solidarity between the peoples of Latin America and Iran, and it has been focused on promoting the achievements of liberation movements in the countries of ALBA. In 2021, he received the Cuban Friendship Medal awarded by the Cuban Council of State. And last but not least, we have Amru. Amru is a longtime political activist. Their organizing work focuses on the rights of Palestinian people and more generally, the struggles of colonized people against imperialism. As an Egyptian from New Jersey, they grew up in the Arab community of North Jersey, specifically the Palestinian Muslim community of Paterson, New Jersey, aka Little Palestine. And they have been going to Palestine demonstrations their whole life. They spent the past few years organizing protests and teach-ins in New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia centered around Palestinian prisoners and the Palestinian resistance. Last year, they were in Egypt providing mutual aid support to displaced Palestinians from Gaza and raising money for evacuations. Currently, they are launching a new organization named Nidal, which focuses on cultivating resistance culture here in the West. First, we're actually going to have an announcement from Sarah Flounders.
Well, greetings to everyone who is here at this meeting and to everyone who is online joining us today. Thursday is May Day, is May 1st. International Workers' Day. And we have a very important message for the workers here in New York, where there is a demonstration organized by a number of unions with very important union demands about the struggle here. But that International Workers' Day was a day established well over 100 years ago to remind workers that they are part of an international class. Especially on May Day this year, when there is an urgent call from workers in Gaza to make May Day a day to come out in support of them, we want to honor this request. So we're urging everyone here to stay for a meeting that we're organizing at 3 o'clock today to be part of planning May Day in New York. We're going to be at Zuccotti Park, a whole contingent with drums, with signs, with flags, with chants. Everyone will march by us in the union contingents, and we feel there would be overwhelming solidarity and support for this message that some of the union leaders may have forgotten. We want to remind them that heart and soul, the workers here today are for Palestine. So be part of the planning at 3 o'clock. And if you're listening online, regardless of where you are right now in the US or internationally, bring that message to May Day. Bring signs, bring keffiyehs, bring flags, bring drums, make noise, make yourself heard, and all the way to Gaza, putting up such heroic resistance, and to the entire axis of resistance. So thank you very much for everyone who's coming. We're looking forward to this discussion and to the planning meeting at 3 o'clock.
Thank you, Sarah. So our first question for our panelists is, what is the basis for unity among the members of the axis of resistance? How do their shared goals and ideologies strengthen their collective struggle against imperialism and Zionism?
Obviously, the basis of unity among the axis of resistance is sovereignty, decolonization, and liberation from imperialism, and understanding above all that none of this is possible, sovereignty or decolonization in the whole region or liberation from imperialism, as long as Palestine is occupied and Zionism exists. None of the countries in the region could have sovereignty if Zionism is not defeated. And this is crucial to understand because of how Zionism and the colony, the Zionist colony, are designed to cut out the heart of the Arabic and Muslim world geographically, and works to cause endless wars in the region that fragment the nations and not allow unification of the peoples and waste the resources endlessly. So, and the one last thing that we must understand here is that, you know, sovereignty of the Arabic and Muslim people from Zionism and imperialism is, you know, cannot exist as long as Zionism exists. Because what are the Zionists requesting of all of us? They're requesting of all of us, Arabs and Muslims, Arabic peoples and Muslims, to acknowledge that Jewish people are superior to us, that they are a chosen people, and that we are less than to accept the existence of the Zionist colony for a Palestinian, for an Arab, for a Muslim, is to denigrate oneself. This is ultimately why Zionism is the main enemy of all the peoples in the region. And this is why the members of the Axis of Resistance, after now 100 years of this Zionist project, have formulated around the idea of liberating Palestine as the only way to achieve sovereignty, decolonization, and liberation in the whole region.
Makes sense.
Hamid or Amr, if you'd like to add on to that.
I'll let Hamid go. Abdul Hamid.
Yes, yes. You have my voice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the video cam because the quality, I think it could be better. So greetings to everyone who is present at the panel, who is following the meeting online, and who may listen to the record of this meeting later on. We have gathered here to reflect on a profound journey, one that has been shaped by resilience, struggle, and unyielding spirit of the people of West Asia to strive for liberty, peace, and justice. To start with, allow me to say some words about West Asia. This region, rich in history and culture, as well as material wealth, has been a focal point of resistance against imperialism and colonialism for generations. West Asia is an area which is strategically situated at the junction of three continents of Asia, Europe, and Africa. Because of its tricontinental location, the region has historically been crossroad of the world. West Asia influenced the commercial activities of ancient, medieval, and modern periods, and is the main alternative for the European region, especially the Mediterranean powers, to obtain political ascendancy in Southeast Asia. It is the cradle of civilization, birthplace of ancient civilization, Mesopotamia, Sumer, and Babylon. It has a history that dates back at least 5,000 years. It is the birthplace of major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which their followers, have lived together in peace for centuries. It has significant religious sites, Jerusalem and Mecca. It has witnessed the rise and fall of great empires, including Ottoman, Persian, and Byzantine. It is home to various ethnic groups, Arabs, Persians, Kurds, and Turks. It is a rich tapestry of languages and traditions. It is the location of key maritime routes, Strait of Hormuz and Suez Canal. It is also home to some of the largest oil reserves, playing a global role in oil production and export, also with significant natural gas reserves. It contains substantial deposits of minerals and metals like phosphate, copper, gold, and iron ore. It enjoys vast, fertile lands supporting agriculture production. Now, with this short background, let me respond to your question on the basis of unity among the resistance movements in West Asia. The movements for decolonization in West Asia are united by several key factors that underpin their collective struggle. These include shared historical experiences, common social, political goals, and overlapping ideologies. Many West Asian countries share a history of colonialism and imperialism, which has created a common narrative of struggle against foreign domination. From the Ottoman Empire's dissolution to the arbitrary borders drawn by colonial powers, the legacy of colonial rule has left deep socio-economic and political scars, fostering a sense of shared grievance. These actions disrupted social fabrics, marginalized communities, and imposed foreign governance that disregarded local identities and the people's aspirations in West Asia. Resistance emerged as a natural response. From the Arab revolt during the World War I to the Palestinian liberation movements of today, the voices of those who seek self-determination have echoed through the valleys and mountains of this land. The fundamental goal among these movements is the pursuit of self-determination and sovereignty. They seek to reclaim control over their political, economic, and cultural destinies. There is a shared opposition to foreign military presence and intervention, which is seen as a continuation of colonial practices. Different ideologies, often overlapping, have shaped and helped unifying the resistance movements across national borders in West Asia. This includes nationalism, pan-Arabism, pan-Islamism, and socialism. Many groups among the resistance movement align themselves with anti-imperialism, opposing global capitalism and neo-colonialism, believing that it perpetuates their struggles. To summarize, the basis of unity among different components of resistance movements in West Asia consists of common history and shared values among the peoples who strive for liberty, sovereignty, justice, and in short, self-determination. Thank you.
So there's a shared ideological basis for unity, the first being anti-imperialism and anti-Zionism. The axis is fundamentally opposed to US hegemony and Israeli settler colonialism in West Asia. They view Zionism as an extension of Western imperialism, specifically American imperialism, seeing Israel as a colonial outpost enforcing American domination over the region. Inspired by Islamic revolutionary thought, Pan-Arabism, and Marxist-Leninist influences. Second is Islamic solidarity and liberation theology. Iran's Islamic Republic, Ansarullah, Hezbollah frame resistance as a religious duty. Hamas and Islamic Jihad share this Islamic revolutionary ideology, seeing Palestine as a sacred Islamic cause. There's also strategic and military cooperation. The first is a united front against common enemies. Israel and US are shared adversaries. All Axis members face direct or proxy warfare from Israel and the US, either through sanctions on Iran, Israeli strikes in Syria, US bombings in Yemen, etc. The second is military coordination. Iran provides arms, training, and funding to Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iraqi factions. Hezbollah shares guerrilla warfare expertise with Palestinian groups. Syria served as a logistical hub for resistance forces. And Yemen's Ansarullah opened a new front by attacking Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea. Lastly is deterrence through multi-front capabilities. The Axis employs asymmetric warfare, missiles, drones, guerrilla tactics to counter US and Israeli firepower. Hezbollah's missile arsenal deters Israel's attacks on Lebanon. Hamas's October 7th operation demonstrated the Axis' ability to strike Israel directly. And Yemen's blockade on Israeli ships pressures Israel economically. So with these combined strategy shows that there's a coordinated effort. And they also demonstrate unity consistently when they honor the martyrs or when spokespeople like Abu Ubaidah affirm their connection to Iran, Hezbollah, and Yemen and Iraq. That's it. Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to question number 2. Why has armed struggle become the chosen path of the axis of resistance in confronting imperialism and Zionism? And how is this strategy rooted in their historical, political, and ideological context? Laith, would you mind taking this?
Yeah, well, the armed struggle is the only way to defeat colonialism. This is a historic fact. Any people that were colonized and didn't fight back and or were defeated don't exist today as a sovereign nation. And of course, you are in the United States, and our indigenous brothers and sisters today are deal as an example of that fact. And we wish that they're able to liberate themselves from the yoke of European colonialism, and we can change Canada and the United States, Australia, New Zealand, all these countries to be countries that represent their indigenous nations. Well, this is a fact. You know, you have to be involved in armed struggle to liberate yourself. And the Arabic peoples, as we know them today, the Arabic world has dealt with a history of 6,000 years of colonialism by the Europeans. And our struggle and experience over those centuries of various waves of colonialism, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Crusaders to the French and the English and to the US Israeli Jusaders, has taught us that's the only way we can resist, and is to carry arms against the colonizers. And look, there's something very specific for us also as Arabic people. I know that it's we're very maligned in Western media, most maligned people in Western media, and people should be reading, by the way, Jacques Shaheen, Professor Jacques Shaheen, Real Bad Arabs, to understand how the first ever good representation of an Arabic or Muslim person in West American media, Hollywood, was in 2004. By every other representation before that is ugly. But what I'm trying to say here is that our relationship with Europe includes not only colonization of land, it includes cultural colonization for those 6,000 years of interaction, whether it's the looting of the Canaanite pantheon by the Greeks that turned it to their Greek pantheon, and then the Romans to the Roman pantheon, or the looting of the Canaanite alphabet to become Greek and Roman Latin alphabets, and eventually the looting of Judaism and Christianity by Europeans. This is a relation that the European are putting the Arabic person into a zero-sum game. If I acknowledge as an Arabic person any of this idea that white people are the sum of Judeo-Christian civilization, which is mine. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is mine as a person from this region. If I acknowledge that, I cease to be. I give up not only my land and I give up my whole history and culture. And that is why there is the colonizer puts us in this position as we understand from the wretched of the earth to have no choice but to carry arms against the colonizer.
Hamid or Amr?
I could step in. So history proves diplomacy fails. Palestinians tried negotiations like the Oslo Accords, but Israel expanded settlements anyways. Lebanon's Hezbollah expelled Israel in 2000 through resistance, something Arab armies failed to do in wars. Violent oppression demands violent resistance. Israel's occupation, apartheid, and massacres leave no peaceful options. Like Hassan Nasrallah says, the resistance is forced, not chosen. Ideology of jihad and anti-colonialism. Islamic revolutionary thought, like in Iran and Hamas, sees armed struggle as a religious duty. Marxist groups like PFLP follow anti-colonial theorists like Fanon, who argue violence breaks oppression. And it works. Hezbollah's 2006 victory humiliated Israel. Hamas's 2023 Al-Aqsa flood shattered Israel's invincibility myth. And Yemen's blockade pressures Israel economically. So when occupation, apartheid, and massacres continue for 100 years, armed resistance becomes the only language the oppressor understands. And something that ties into the first question I forgot to mention was the fact that something that unites all of us is the genocide. It's not just happening in Gaza, it's the genocide of the people of West Asia. 2 million Iraqis, 500,000 Yemenis, 500,000 Syrians. It's clear that the genocide is on the broader region as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, I may add some words to this question, in response to this question. Well, the corporate media insinuates the narrative as if the resistance fighters in our region, in West Asia, chose armed struggles as a matter of choice among several other options to combat the Zionist regime of Israel. They even picture the brave Palestinian combatants as merciless terrorists committed to killing peaceful, innocent people. However, examining the historical facts shows that such a narrative is totally false, aimed at demonizing the Palestinian and other freedom fighters in our region. In reality, the armed struggle emerged as a path of resistance against imperialism in West Asia due to a confluence of historical, political, and ideological factors. This method of fight was indeed imposed on Palestinians because of not having other options.
Sure.
Before I get to the next question, I just want to note that the book Laith recommended, Real Bad Arabs, is also a documentary film. So if you folks would like to check that out as well, I would recommend that. And that brings us to the next question about the role of media and misinformation. So what role do media outlets like Al Jazeera and Middle East Eye play in pushing sectarian narratives? And then a second part to this question is, in what ways do sanctions, misinformation, and regime change operations at large serve as tools of imperialism?
Why don't we start off with Laith?
Well, obviously, sanctions are a death sentence in a world that is dominated by the American dollar and American financial institutions. There's not much to say there beyond the fact that Syria was a totally sovereign country in terms of its productions. It had surpluses, 7-year surpluses of all of its essentials, wheat and rice and oils, and it had the biggest and most solid industrial base in the Arabic world. It was the #1 competitor for any foreign, food products in the whole Arabic region. It had a huge um, clothing industry and heavy and medium-sized electronics and industrial machining. It had some of the most brilliant mechanics in the world. This is why Germany stole the hundreds of thousands of Syrian mechanics that rejuvenated the car industry in Germany that was at its deathbed. And just a few hours ago, we heard the story that Saudi Arabia and Qatar decided to pay the IMF debt of Syria, which was $15 million. And that only was a loan that Syria took at the beginning of the war. Syria had a zero international debt before that. And so the sanctions destroyed this country that had food sovereignty, that had sovereignty in all its basics, that had ran a boycott itself of the Western products since the 1970s and was able to produce and buy from its allies all its needs, didn't need to depend on the West. And this is what sanctions did to Syria. Now Syria is a starving country that is destroyed and has no industry, and the industry was looted by the Turks. And now the Turkish products flood this country with no competition. And misinformation and propaganda. The United States runs the largest propaganda machine humanity has ever known. I mean, one time President Putin of Russia was asked why is Russia not spending more, competing with the narratives that the United States is putting forward. And he said, it's a fool's errand, to compete with the United States because of the fact that it has the largest propaganda machine known to humanity. And obviously Al Jazeera and Qatari-based media like Middle East Eye, within this propaganda machine of the West, were allowed to be supportive of Palestinian people and their cause as victims, okay, in order for them to actually criticize those who take action to support Palestine. Because in reality, the Palestinian struggle doesn't matter what you say, how you're not threatening the Zionists by talking against Zionists. Because as we see, the American public and the Western public have been out in the streets for 17 months. And all the surveys tell us that the vast majority of the populace in the West are anti-genocide in Gaza, anti-arming the Zionist colony, and the younger generations even wanted to cease to exist. But that doesn't change anything. Talk doesn't change anything. What matters is who takes action. Can you take action to support the liberation of Palestine? in the form of warfare, that is the axis of resistance. And Al Jazeera and all the Qatari propaganda machines that are part component of the Western propaganda empires are allowed to portray Palestinians as victims as long as they can keep on capturing the Arabic and Western audiences that are sympathetic to Palestinians as victims only. And then they can attack and undermine everyone that actually takes action to support the liberation of the Palestinians and to end the genocide and end Zionism. And the Al Jazeera even occasionally provides a sacrifice journalist, okay? As we saw in Gaza, as we saw in Iraq, as we saw in Afghanistan, those journalists that the United States and Israel killed that belong to Al Jazeera and other Qatari outlets are sacrifices put there by their owners, by the Qatari regime, in order to maintain the credibility of these propaganda outlets and keep on capturing the audience. And, you know, they have succeeded, it seems like. I think out of all the propaganda machine, look at the propaganda machine of the West, how it demolished itself over the last 17 months. BBC, CNN, CBC, ABC, everybody destroyed their own credibility and are unable right now to capture the audience anywhere around the world on any subject. If they played the smart propaganda of Al Jazeera and actually sided a little bit with the Palestinian people during the genocide, BBC, while BBC is continuing to be an imperialist, colonialist, you know, propaganda machine on every other file, they would have been a smarter propaganda machine. This is right now why Al Jazeera is currently the crown in the jewel of the imperialist propaganda news machine.
Hamid or Amr?
All right. So yeah, sanctions, misinformation, and regime change. Sanctions crush economies to force submission, like you've seen with Iran and Syria. Misinformation is used to justify wars, like with the lies of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And it's also used to demonize the resistance by calling Hamas terrorists. And it's also used as a way to justify civilian death, or by saying that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, or that they operate through hospitals and schools. And the media's role, specifically Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye, although Al Jazeera sometimes challenges Western narratives and even goes as far as to showcase Hamas's operations, they still push Qatar's agenda and are anti-Iran and anti-Syria. Middle East Eye is a little better on Palestine, but still avoids full access to solidarity. It downplays Hezbollah's victories. Same with Al Jazeera, they never showcase Hezbollah's operations. The current sectarianism is a response to the unity we've seen since October 7th. The resistance in Palestine dedicating and aiming weapons at brothers in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, flags of the resistance axis seen in actions all around the Middle East. So it's not surprising to see the uptick of old sectarian narrative on social media at the same time that we see it dissolving in the streets of our capitals. The usual agents are being activated in a desperate bid to keep sectarian division alive. The resistance goes out of their way to highlight this contradiction of sectarianism by consistently thanking and honoring members of the axis of resistance. So the fact that our enemies are having to resort to sectarianism speaks to the success we have enjoyed in the axis of resistance, mending these artificial divides. but we must retain clarity of vision and not allow this to be undone, but instead encourage it to flourish further. Thank you.
Anything you'd like to add, Hamid? Okay. All right, so we're moving on to the next question. The next question is, why did the Western Palestine Solidarity Movement largely ignore Syria until it fell under the HTS-led coup? And how does this reflect issues of misinformation and complicity in imperialist narratives? So we can start off with Laith.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Canada for 25 years, and I was involved in the Palestine Liberation Movement on campuses starting from the year 2000. And I saw the arc of the change in the struggle and from it being radical. Obviously, we saw the Second Intifada, then September 11, and the wars on Afghanistan and Iraq. And I would say the biggest obstacles that were in front of the new wave of Palestinian solidarity movement in the West that started at the end of the last century and the beginning of the 2000s was the liberal currents and the anarchist currents that exist within what we'd call progressive, leftist, whatever spaces that are in the West. Whether it being the liberal strain that pushes people to try to engage within the system, the colonial system in Canada and the United States and what have you. And we saw, of course, how that affected, for instance, the Black liberation movement in the United States. And the other is the anarchist current that existed in the West with the anti-globalization movement at the end of the last century, accumulating with the Battle of Seattle, and that pressure on the Arabic organizers, Arabic communities, to kind of not create their own institutions and to fall into those two categories of this anarchism and or liberalism. And so this was a huge distraction, and added to it comes the curse of the Arab autumn. I don't call it the Arab Spring. The Arab autumn fractured the Arabic communities in the West, those who were all gathered together around the suffering of the Palestinian people suddenly had to think about their own suffering. And we saw a fragmentation of this Arabic community that was already pretty much isolated. And eventually, all the propaganda that came with this sectarian propaganda and the misinformation. And of course, this all, if we want to think about it philosophically, as Ibn Khaldun, the great philosopher, will tell you, the main problem that the liberation movement here in our region faced was the third generation curse, the three generations curse, with the liberation movement in the 1940s being the first generation that achieved liberation, let's say in Syria and the region. And by the third generation, the one that was cursed with the Arab autumn, there was no successes that we can say of unification of the Arabic world. And this is why we're dealing right now with this. And the rest of the axis of resistance, like Iran, are on the second generation after the liberation in 1979. Similarly, Hezbollah here in Lebanon is on the second generation since the creation of their movement. So I know straight away a little bit from answering, but I was trying to say that there is, on the one hand, causes for this on the ground here because we were unable to succeed in reaching a liberation and or giving an example affecting the movements in the West. The other is those local issues of fragmentation of the Arabic population after the Arab Autumn and the problematic currents that exist already within the progressive movements in the West.
So there, one reason is imperialist propaganda. Mainstream media frame the war as a democratic revolution, obscuring Western-backed regime change efforts, and many activists, unfortunately, uncritically accepted this narrative. And another reason, which we talked about, is sectarian blind spots. A Sunni-centric view painted Bashar as the sole villain, ignoring Syria's role in the axis of resistance, and supporting the Syrian government was seen as taboo, so people avoided it. Another reason is selective anti-imperialism. Some feared that defending Syria would alienate liberal allies or contradict pro-revolution rhetoric, even as the opposition became dominated by HTS. So when Al-Qaeda-linked factions like HTS took over, some realized the hypocrisy that opposing imperialism in Palestine by ignoring it in Syria. And this weakens collective resistance. So like the lesson to take away from this is true anti-imperialism requires consistency and not just cherry-picking causes.
Thank you. So I think we lost Hamid. If he gets internet back, he might rejoin.
I'm back. I'm back, but I think I will be disconnected again. That it's terrible. The situation with the internet is terrible. Just go ahead with the meeting, and I try to follow.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you to answer this question first. So why is there a blackout in the Western Palestine Solidarity Movement regarding Iran's contributions to the axis of resistance and its support for Palestinian liberation?
Hamid, if you could take this question first.
Yes, until I get disrupted, let me. Well, the blackout in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement in regard to Iran's contributions to the axis of resistance in West Asia and for the Palestinian liberation in particular stems from and it is influenced by the role of imperialist propaganda and corporate media on giving a totally false picture of Iran to the public opinion, to the world public opinion in general, and especially to the public opinion in the imperialist countries, in the United States and European countries. Demonizing and spreading disinformation and misinformation in Iran has been a persistent policy of imperialism toward Iran ever since the triumph of the Islamic Revolution. If we understand this, then we would better comprehend the reason for lack of appreciation among the Western Solidarity Movement about the decisive role of Iran in support of resistance movements in West Asia. All you hear in corporate media about Iran is horror stories. It's all about lack of human rights, discrimination against women and religious minorities, imprisonment and torture of freedom fighters, and those sort of stories. Not a word about achievements of Iran in different areas during the last 46 years since the overthrow of the puppet regime of the Shah. Not a word, not even a word about the sincere contributions of Iran to resistance movements in West Asia, and likewise the support of Iran for other liberation movements in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They do not talk about this because it doesn't serve their purpose and interest to poison world public opinion on Iran. However, despite this false propaganda, the fact remains that Iran has been not only a major component of the axis of resistance, but also a source of inspiration and bastion of support for other parts of resistance movements in West Asia. And this is not what I claim as a supporter of the Iranian revolution, but something that has been testified repeatedly by the leaders of such movements in our region. And another witness that would testify in support of this claim is the numerous graves of Iranian freedom fighters who were martyred in the combat zones in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Palestine. This is the context, this is the situation. There are a couple of other points which I would like to just briefly mention. This policy of ignoring the role of Iran, and when we talk about this, we have to consider the policy of divide and rule, the old policy of the imperialists. Something else that they do in order to ignore or hide the role of Iran is referring to challenges faced by the Iranian people to realize their aspirations as an excuse to deny the positive role of Iran in liberation movements and to reach a multipolar world based on sovereignty of nations. Allow me to conclude my remarks on this question that for you, for the brave people, young people of the United States who are organizing this fantastic meeting, it is very important to pay attention, to listen to the words of Iran directly, to see the facts and truth from our mouth, to listen to Nasrallah, to listen to the leaders of Hamas, how they praise the contributions of Iran to the resistance movement, and to not be deceived by this false argument that Iran has this problem, that problem. Yes, we do. Of course we do. Like every other nation, we have problems. Some of the problems, big problems, most of them, the great majority of these problems actually are the result of imperialist aggressive policies towards Iran, are results of sanctions on Iran, limitations on Iran, depriving Iranian children and women from medicine. These are the reason for our problems. And if you have other problems like the role of the capitalists who look to the Wall Street, this is a problem that let us solve our problem. Let us solve our problem. Put this question on our shoulder and be sure that we will take care of it. What we need you to do is to express your solidarity unconditionally with the Iranian people. Thank you.
So there's geopolitical stigma. Iran is heavily demonized in Western media as a terrorist state. So it makes it politically risky for mainstream activists to acknowledge its contributions. And US sanctions has successfully isolated Iran from global discourse. There's also sectarian biases, which we discussed in the previous questions. Many Western activists, particularly Sunni influence groups, reject Iran's Shia-led resistance. Groups like Muslim Brotherhood aligned organizations promote anti-Iran narratives, and that trickles into leftist spaces. There's also liberal co-optation. Mainstream solidarity movements often conform to state-approved positions. Admitting Iran's key role would undermine the West's good resistance versus bad resistance dichotomy. There's also ideological contradictions. Some lefts prioritize anti-Americanism over actual anti-imperialism. Others can't reconcile Islamic resistance with their secular worldview, which is a broader problem with the left even accepting like Hamas and the Palestine resistance as a whole. And so this blackout serves imperialist interests by erasing the most effective military backer of the Palestinian resistance, preventing a united front against Zionism. The martyr Nizar Bennett talks about Iran extensively. He says that like Iran's the only country on earth that has a clause in their budget dedicated to helping the Palestinian resistance. This is money taken directly from the Iranian people to help Palestine. They're also one of the most like heavily sanctioned countries on earth. So like to say they have their own agenda, just ignoring the facts about how much they actually like materially sacrifice to help Palestine. And the result is a neutered solidarity movement that won't acknowledge the forces actually fighting for liberation, and it creates division amongst our movement here. Thank you.
Laith, is there anything that you would like to add for this question?
Well, obviously, I think racism that is soaked in all the culture in the West, cultural production in the West, permeates even these progressive spaces. And we are not immune to propaganda, no matter who we think we are. And the fear of religion. And there's two things here. One is people should go to these locations. I personally visited Iran, and as a leftist with all this knowledge and history of Iran and of support of the axis of resistance and so on, I still myself was shocked to see things contradict propaganda that we hear when I went to Iran. I mean, I thought I was immune to the propaganda, but then I realized that I was myself, affected by this propaganda. What I saw in Iran, in terms of, for instance, I was there just after the supposed demonstrations for women that the whole West paid for, and I expected that I would see a lot of people in hijab or full black chadors. And the reality was that in the street, 25% of women wore the black chador. 25% of the women had nothing on their heads. And maybe around 50% put on a shawl, like women in the US did in the 1940s, with showing half of their hair. And they're all wearing whatever they want to. I didn't see any problems, anybody harassing anybody, telling them what dress code. And the thing that shocked me even more was seeing that all public transportation was free, public education, public health care, supported and subsidized gas and oil, and subsidized housing. There was, gas and oil were so cheap. There was nobody hungry. Even I went during the commemoration of General Soleimani's assassination, and I saw the tens and hundreds of thousands of people coming to the graveyard to visit his grave. And even in that incident, at least 50% of women had those just shawls on their head, and there was still 25% of the women in the graveyard with nothing covering their head. So you will be shocked to see. And I would say one last thing here in terms of religion, and this is something that everybody in the left has to understand. The Zionists tell us they are chosen people, that God gave them this land. They are the ones that are making this into a religious war. And currently, not only the Jewish Zionists in the colony that are saying this, but the vast majority, if not all official Jewish organizations in the West, official, I said, and every Western government is telling us that this is a holy war. It is not only racist to expect the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Muslims of Iran not to fight this on religious grounds. It is also asking the people of the land, the indigenous people that are fighting their war that is put on them like this, to surrender their own religiosity, and for the only official religiosity to be backed by imperial weaponry is to be Zionism. And again, notice I didn't say Judaism. The official religion right now of the United States is Zionism. You are the holy that you cannot desecrate, you cannot denigrate, is Zionism. You can denigrate any prophet, any religion, including Jewish religion and Jewish prophets in the United States, anywhere on air, but you cannot criticize Zionism and the state of Israel. So this is a religious war, not because I chose it to be as a Palestinian leftist. It is what the West has chosen it to be. And so you cannot ask us not to fight it on religious grounds either.
May I add a couple of other points to this question?
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, just very shortly. One thing that I would like to bring the attention of the audience of this fantastic panel is that right now that we are speaking, there is ongoing negotiations between Iran and the United States, apparently on the question of, on the issue of nuclear issue. But the fact remains that the main issue of the pressures against Iran, main reason for the sanctions against Iran, are the support that Iran has provided for the resistance movement. And even though they are not explicitly admitting that they are demanding Iran to withdraw its support from the resistance movement, that lays as the basis and the basic reason behind all these pressures and aggressions against Iran. This demands the solidarity of the solidarity movement, especially in the Western countries, with Iran at this crucial time that they are threatening Iran with the military war. Meanwhile, that they're negotiating, they are putting pressures on Iran. They are demanding Iran to give up its rights for developing peaceful nuclear energy, because this is the reality of the matter. Iran is pursuing peaceful program to develop nuclear energy for medical purposes, for the industrial purposes, and everybody knows that. Even the intelligence community of the United States, all the parts of this community, they confess and they admit that Iran is not after the nuclear bomb. So it's again very important at this timing to express solidarity with Iran, to support Iran's positions on the negotiations, that it wants to develop its peaceful program for nuclear energy. It wants to continue its support for the resistance movement. This is the feeling of the masses of the people. As my colleague just mentioned, we have lost our heroes in this struggle. We have lost not only General Soleimani, but many, many tens and hundreds of young Iranians who have lost their lives in this communist struggle. Thanks again.
All right, so we're moving on to our next question. Can you help debunk the sectarian narratives against Hezbollah and martyr Syed Hassan Nasrallah, which claim they are terrorists? Why have some in the Western Palestine movement villainized him? So if we can have Laith start off here.
Yeah, I think the first thing that people need to understand about Hezbollah is that it is the only liberation movement in human history that won the battle to liberate its nation, its state, from an occupier, from a colonizer, that didn't also immediately take control of the state as the liberators, okay? So Hezbollah in the year 2000, after the defeat of the Zionists, chose not to take control of the state, although it had the right to, as any liberation movement that succeeds should. Why they did that is because they didn't want to have a sectarian civil war. They've lived that for decades under American, French, Israeli prompting of to create that civil war to undermine the support for Palestine in the 1970s and 80s. So that's a unique thing that shows you how Hezbollah deals with these issues. The other is that Hezbollah saved, through entering the battle for Syria, saved the minorities of Syria from the Wahhabi death squads, the Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the 200,000 neo-Mongol horde that the West raised to attack Syria. And with the acknowledgement of the churches in Syria, of the role that Hezbollah did in saving and protecting and liberating Christian sites. Today, for instance, we know that the original and oldest churches in the world that are in Syria, in the Ma'lula and Saydnaya area, south and west of Damascus city, that were protected by Hezbollah during the invasion by the Wahhabi death squads, now have fell under control of the HDS, and the nuns and priests were expelled, and all the original Christians that still speak the language of Jesus Christ, the Aramaic people that the Syrian government protected and gave, education in Aramaic language in their villages, so and so on, they have all been expelled. Tens of thousands of the original Christians of the world are now in refugee camps here in Lebanon, and we visited them from FPTV. We haven't done the reports yet in the refugee camps here in Lebanon. So Hezbollah sees its role in a religious context as protector of those who are being oppressed. Their first duty in religion is in Islam and the contextualization of Hezbollah is that you cannot force somebody into religion. What's the point to force somebody at the sword to believe in a God? They don't believe in it. They just believe in the sword. So point is, this is not the same conceptualization of Wahhabi and Ikhwani Islam that was nurtured by the United States and before them the British at the turn of the century, at the end of the 1800s, the beginnings of the 1900s, as the British also in the West nurtured Zionism, the same equivalent of Wahhabism within the Jewish communities. So Hezbollah is right now, I can see even the Christian Alawi and Shias of Syria that have arrived here into Lebanon. Who is taking them in? Who's protecting them in this country but Hezbollah? And again, that's the kind of religiosity that Hezbollah envisions.
Hezbollah was formed in 1982 to fight Israeli occupation of Lebanon. It's an indigenous Lebanese militia. It succeeded in forcing Israel's complete withdrawal in 2000, the only Arab force to defeat Israel militarily. And they're usually defensive, not aggressive. Hezbollah's military actions are response-based. It does not attack Israel unless Israel strikes first, like with the 2006 war and the ongoing border crisis. And it has popular support. Hezbollah is not an isolated militia. It holds seats in Lebanese parliament, runs social services, and has mass support for resisting Israel. Why have some in the Western Palestine movement villainized Nasrallah and Hezbollah? I mean, we discussed this a lot, same reasons as Iran. There's imperialist and sectarian propaganda. There's Orientalism, there's liberal co-optation, selective anti-imperialism, misinformation campaigns, media distortions. But the reality is that Hezbollah is the most effective anti-Zionist force. Deterrence against Israel. Without Hezbollah, Lebanon would be occupied like Palestine. And their role in axis of resistance, Hezbollah's alliance with Syria, Iran, and Palestinian factions prevents total Israeli domination of West Asia. Nasrallah's leadership, unlike Arab dictators who normalized with Israel, Nasrallah never compromised. His speeches unite millions against imperialism. I just want to also highlight that the ceasefire we saw last year was actually like a defeat. Lebanon defeated, Hezbollah defeated Israel, and it was only, I guess, announced as a ceasefire as a way to like save Israel's reputation, which is something they usually use the media for. And in Gaza, most of the people love Nasrallah. They even have pictures of him in their homes after his death. Members of the Palestinian resistance honored him. But I typically don't like to answer this question, like debunking Hezbollah. It's kind of like when people ask you to debunk like Hamas is like as a terrorist organization. Like in the Muslim community, when we hear the claims of like sexual assault or like murdering children, all these things, we immediately know they're false. We don't even have to wait for like journalistic efforts like from Electronic Intifada to debunk it. We know it's false because they're not terrorists, they're a military and they have a strict moral code, an Islamic code. But I think because of sectarianism, Sunni Muslims can't extend the same courtesy to Hezbollah that they have for Hamas. Like we immediately like dismiss any claim of Hamas being terrorist, but like entertain the claim that Hezbollah is terrorist, but they're the same. They are a militia with strict moral codes, Islamic codes of warfare. Yeah, thank you.
Hamid, would you like to add anything?
Just one simple point, maybe, and that is the fact that despite the blows against Hezbollah, the attack, the terror of the leaders of Hezbollah, Nasrallah and other great leaders of Hezbollah, still, Hezbollah is still alive, is there, mobilizing the people, recruiting young people to its ranks, providing support not only for the Shia community, but all other supporters of other beliefs within Lebanon and in a broader sense throughout the Muslim world. This is a totally false picture that the imperialist media tries to imply that Hezbollah and Nasrallah only defended Shia community, which is not true, as it was mentioned by other colleagues at the panel. It is interesting, I'm sure that most of the people present at this panel know that Hezbollah has been working, cooperating, collaborating with the communist forces within Lebanon and in a broader sense within the resistance movement in our region. So these are maybe some of the points that should be highlighted.
Thank you. Next, we would like to talk about Yemen and Ansar Allah. So our question is, what drives Ansar Allah's solidarity with Palestine despite facing a US-backed Saudi-led war? And why is there a hesitancy in the Western Palestine movement to uplift their accomplishments? And maybe we can start with Laith.
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem is the same in terms of sectarianism that has been fed by the West. I want to say that at the end of the 2006 war, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, became the most beloved person in the Arabic world. There was people out in the streets of Cairo, in the streets of Morocco, Tunis, in the streets of Qatar, carrying his pictures and the flags of Hezbollah at the end of the 2006 war. And this is, remember, the American plan was to attack Iraq, then attack Hezbollah, then attack Syria, and then finally attack Iran in terms of the axis of resistance. And part of the 7 countries within 5 years or 5, that included Libya and Yemen and Sudan, basically all the republics, all the Arabic republics, no matter what, misgivings we may have for the way they govern themselves, but all the countries that escaped colonialism at the end of World War II in the Arabic world were in this target. And because of the failure to take down Hezbollah, it was the West formulated the Arabic Autumn, okay, which created, part of it was this fragmentation of the Arabic world and taking back all the republics like Libya, so forth, and the nurturing of sectarianism against specifically the Shia populations that were resisting imperialism and had this fortitude of religion that fortified them against cultural penetration into their mind. This is part of it. Look, imperialists don't want to homogenize us because they actually have a problem with Islam or something like that, or don't want to force all indigenous people to speak English okay, when they were colonizing the United States because they didn't like a certain indigenous language. It's about how can you control a population that has fragmented cultures and languages. You need to homogenize them. And the war that the West has against Shia Islam, for instance, currently is because of their inability to penetrate their mind. So Yemen, it's the enemies of Yemen are the Arab monarchies, those countries that didn't escape colonialism after World War II, and in fact were created and fabricated and kept in power by the imperialists, and all their resources, this Arabic oil, Arabic gas, was used to finance the wars of colonialism and oppression against the Arabic people and the world as a whole. Okay, and in fact, we can say, you know, these Arabic monarchies, vassal monarchies, fought every wave of Arabic liberation, starting from the Syrian unification thought in the 1940s, then the Arabic unification thought with Jamal Abdel Nasser, and then the Arabic communists with like the PFLP and the Arabic Liberation Movement that came with them. And when defeating that, they went after the liberals like the Fatah of, Arafat in Libya. And this is why the only thing that was left in the Arabic or Muslim world, just like happened in Iran with the attacks on the communists and progressives in the 1950s, the coup against Mossadegh, there was no choice left, no gathering point for arts populations here except around the banner of religion, because in the end, that's what also our enemy is forcing us to be. And so Yemen, to reach its own liberation, has no choice but to also help in the liberation of Palestine. The Zionist existence of the Zionist colony in Palestine maintains these Arab vassal monarchies. If Yemen wants to be liberated, even if it liberates itself only, as happened after World War II, after the 1960s revolution against the British occupation, because the Zionist colony existed, that meant the reactionary vassal kingdoms, monarchies remained. Therefore, the revolution, Yemeni revolution, reverted after one generation of nothing, no successes. This is what ends up happening. So Yemen's liberation is tied to the liberation of Palestine, as is the liberation of all the Arabic peoples and by extension, the Muslim peoples in the world.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I feel like they answered it. And in terms of their solidarity, I think it was answered the first question about the unity of the axis of resistance. They have a shared ideological basis of anti-imperialism and anti-Zionism. I think also like something that's overlooked a lot is like the genocide is also happening to Yemen. Like the West Asian genocide has taken 500,000 Yemeni lives. It's more than in Palestine, actually. So it's not just solidarity with Palestine, they're active in the fight against American Israel and imperialism in West Asia. And even like their Islamic resistance principles, like the slogan of their flag explicitly says death to America, death to Israel. And something Ansar Allah and Yemen consistently does is they actually walk the walk. Like while Western movements often limit their solidarity to performative gestures, Yemen has like denied multiple attempts to be bought out. Western powers offered to pay off their debt, remove their name from the terrorist list, remove all sanctions, but they remain steadfast. Every Friday, there's a million-man march in Yemen for Palestine. And unlike protests here, they're not protesting their government because their government supports Palestine. They're just there to show solidarity. And that's what I try to take for our movement. Like when we go out in the streets here in America, like it should be like with the same mentality. We're not gonna demand or protest America do anything different because they never listen and they have no reason to listen. But we will show up for Palestine to show them their solidarity, our solidarity. So thank you.
Hamid, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just go ahead.
Great. So now we're moving on to our 8th question, second to last one. How have Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar contributed to the imperialist project in West Asia? And what is the significance of normalization agreements like the Abraham Accords? If we can have you start off, Laith.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of answered that partially by listing, obviously, at the end of World War One, there was the Arabic, during the World War One, the Arabic revolt, quote unquote, against the Ottoman occupation. And there was supposed to be a unified Arabic state that encompasses the Hijaz area where Mecca and Medina are, and all of greater Syria, meaning Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. And it fell under one kingdom. And the Hashemites ruled that. And it started with the British giving weapons to the Wahhabi death squads and the Saud family to invade Mecca and Medina and the Hijaz. And those same Wahhabi death squads that we saw acting in Iraq and Syria did the same thing inside Mecca and Medina, destroyed all the shrines of the family of Muhammad and his companions and various holy and wise men that are buried and women buried in those two cities. Even the burial ground where Muhammad is in Medina is locked up and not allowed people to visit. The point of what I'm trying to say to you is that the Gulf states have fought Arabic unification on behalf of the West since their fabrication as states themselves. Qatar, Bahrain, the Emirates, Kuwait didn't exist before the 1960s and 70s. For instance, the United Arab Emirates, what is that? It used to be called the Desert of Oman. Okay, it used to be called Pirate Coast because any wanted person in the Gulf area that wanted to hide somewhere would go there. Bahrain, when it was created in the 1970s, had a population of 40,000 people. A half a block in, not even New York, half a block in Beirut. Okay, Qatar had 60,000 as a population when it was fabricated. And all the oil and gas of these countries was used to fight, Syrian unification, Arabic unification, communist, liberal, anybody and everybody. And therefore, obviously, and finally is, Wahhabism and Ikhwanism are the export of these countries to create malice in every country that the West wants to occupy and colonize, as we see with the Wahhabi was being exported from countries to Nigeria, to Somalia, to Central Asia, to all what happened in Syria and Iraq. So they play a crucial role. And until the Arabic people are able to unify and liberate these lands from these monarchies, vassal monarchies, we're going to be stuck in this situation.
Amr?
Yeah, the Gulf states act as imperialist gatekeepers, selling out West Asia for their own interests. Um, Saudi Arabia and the UAE fund wars in Yemen and Syria. They back coups. They push normalization with Israel to secure U.S. protection for their dictatorships. Qatar plays both sides. They fund Hamas, but also host U.S. bases, but ultimately serve Western agendas by dividing resistance movements. Even Qatar and Egypt's role as mediators are like ordered by America in the West. They're just following American orders. And the Abraham Accord, it was a U.S. orchestrated betrayal of Palestine, rewarding Gulf regimes with armed deals and money while they abandoned Palestinian rights. It was aimed to isolate Iran and fracture the axis of resistance by bribing Arab states to recognize Israel. Yeah, that's all.
Hamid, if you would like to add anything.
No, not really. I'm still having problem with my connections, but so just go ahead. I'm learning and enjoying the contribution of our colleagues at the panel.
Thank you.
Okay, so our final question is actually 3 questions. What does material solidarity with Palestine and the axis of resistance look like for those of us in the imperial core? What specific actions can we take to support their struggles while challenging US imperialism? And lastly, how essential is al-Thawabit in ensuring our solidarity is grounded in the principles of Palestinian liberation rather than co-opted by reformist or performative efforts? Do you want to start, Laith?
Yeah, I mean, direct action is the only way. You know, the Holocaust in Gaza is being conducted by the whole collective West. The Zionist colony wouldn't be able to last one day without the continued delivery of weapons by the West and the providing of political and legal cover to it on the international scene. So the Western populists right now are complicit in this because of their inability to stop their state from, or states from, stopping this genocide or not participating. So direct action is the only thing forward. Clearly, the Western elite and Western governments do not want to listen to the will of the people. And the genocide in Gaza and the continuation of it and our inability to stop it on an international scale have now normalized this across the globe. And we're seeing already, and I have predicted this a year ago, that the citizens of the imperial core are going to now suffer the same fate. And we see already with these ICE raids and the deportation of American citizens and American children into a gulag, into a concentration camp in El Salvador to disappear, being nabbed off the streets in unmarked cars with people refusing to identify who they are. Tomorrow, for instance, a gang of Zionists in New York could be kidnapping one of you guys and pretending they're ICE. They could kill you and throw you in the river and nothing would happen. They could lynch you in the street, as we saw happen, what is it, yesterday or something, to that woman in the demonstration. We are past that now. So only direct action and this array of direct actions can go from something nonviolent to actual revolutionary armed struggle. Remember, during the Holocaust and during the Nazi rule, 70,000 German people carried arms against the Nazis and perished, were martyred honorably fighting the Nazis. Today, we don't see anyone in the West, if not carrying arms, actually taking direct action, except the group Palestine Action in the United Kingdom. And this is why I would say right now, looking at what is happening in the West in terms of a fight back against this genocide, the only people that are taking material action are Palestine Action. The rest is not only performative at this point, it's only self-serving. Okay, and this is not going to absolve the populace in the West from the guilt of this crime or the culpability. Even though 70,000 Germans fought the Nazis, till today, Germans are looked at as all guilty of the Nazi crimes. So imagine with not one American putting their life at risk, save for Aaron Bushnell and Rachel Corrie or Thomas Hundel. Those are some of the examples that of the lowest I think we can think about. And I would say out of all of this array of what Western citizens have a responsibility for, I think our Jewish brothers and sisters that claim to be anti-Zionist have the highest responsibility to take action, because this genocide is being conducted in their name. Whether they agree with it or not, it's being conducted in their name. It is because the oppression of Palestinian Arabs and Muslims in the United States and anybody who supports the liberation of Palestine is being conducted in their name. Okay, and this is where we kind of come back in a full circle. The Zionists are telling us this is a religious war. And if our brothers and sisters that call themselves anti-Zionist Jews do not fight for the liberation of Judaism, if they don't care to die for the liberation of Palestine, if they don't risk their own life to liberate Judaism from Zionism, for all intensive purposes, Judaism is Zionism, not a choice that I make. This is not what I say. This is what the Zionists say, and this is what the inaction of our anti-Zionist brothers and sisters actually says to me. Why should I risk fight for the honor of Judaism as a Palestinian Muslim to differentiate it from Zionism if my brothers and sisters that are Jewish that call themselves anti-Zionists are not willing to fight for that?
Hamid?
I don't have too much to add. Definitely direct action, boycotts, direct aid, disrupting imperialism actions or protests, amplifying the resistance voices is really important, especially now. We have to avoid co-optation by centering Palestinian leadership, not performative activism. this isn't a separate movement here in the West. This is only an extension of an already existing movement with its own armed militias, own intellectual theorists, with its own leaders. So we should make as much of an effort to have the movement here resemble the movement back home, and using protests or popular action as a way to raise global awareness for our cause is actually an illusion. Our actions should be for our people here. Like the diaspora needs its own institutions. We need to start to organize, influence, and build our own tools. And we could use actions here as a means to do that. The more we organize, the more real tools and strategies will be created. And these actions and tools will eventually ignite a revolution here, or strengthen our movement. Thank you.
Hamid, any closing thoughts here?
Yes, I would like to actually, it's very important that we are concluding this panel, this important panel, with the things that we should do, and to not make the meeting longer. I would just mention some titles rather than elaborating on each topic. Just mention some actions that should be taken. We should be engaged in educating and raising awareness, organizing workshops and discussions, organize educational events that focus on history of Palestine, the impact of United States foreign policy, and the broader context of imperialism in the region. We should be engaged in social media campaigns, use platforms to share information, highlight Palestinian voices, and counter misinformation. We should support Palestinian organizations, donate to grassroots organizations, contribute to Palestinian NGOs that focus on human rights, healthcare, education, and community development. Then again, promote boycott, divestment, and sanctions BDS. Participate and promote BDS campaigns against companies and institutions complicit in the occupation. As mentioned by my colleagues at the panel, engage, this is the most important action that we should take, to be engaged in direct actions, protests and demonstrations. Recently, I was thinking of even having an international campaign if it is required and if it is proper, to have hunger strikes, sit-down strikes, civil obedience, build coalitions, collaborate with other movements, work within groups fighting against systematic racism, colonialism, and imperialism, to create a united front that recognizes the interconnectedness of a struggle, support indigenous rights, recognize parallels between Palestinian struggles and indigenous struggles in the United States and elsewhere, fostering solidarity across movements, advocate for policy change, lobby local representatives, urge elected officials to reconsider military aid to Israel, and support policies that promote Palestinian rights, engage with local governments, push for resolutions that recognize Palestine, host cultural events. I will end shortly. Host cultural events, organize events that celebrate Palestinian culture and history, providing a platform of Palestinian voices, authenticity of solidarity, ensuring that solidarity efforts are aligned with the demands of Palestinians, helps prevent co-optation by reformist agendas that may dilute or misrepresent the struggle for liberation, preventing performative activism by adhering. Activists can avoid superficial gestures that do not challenge the underlying structures of oppression. This focus fosters genuine engagement with the issues at hand, empowerment of Palestinian voices, long-term commitment to this struggle, challenging United States imperialism, and in short, material solidarity with Palestinian and the axis of resistance in West Asia requires concrete actions that prioritize Palestinian liberation while actively challenging United States imperialism. By grounding these efforts in principles, activists can ensure their solidarity is authentic, meaningful, and aligned with the goals of those they seek to support. These are the type of actions that we need to do, especially at this crucial time that every single day, every single hour and minute, our brothers and sisters are dying because of hunger, because of lack of access to water and medicine. Our efforts should be intensified. There was a gathering some months ago in Caracas. This was an anti-fascist gathering, and over there, I used the opportunity to emphasize the need that we should not rest even for a moment until this situation is continuing. We should double our efforts, join our forces, be united in solidarity with Palestine and with the resistance in the West Asia.
Laith, I'd like to give the floor back to you.
Yeah, look, direct action, there's multiple ways you can do that right now. When we talk about our Jewish brothers and sisters, they can go face to face with the Zionist organizations in the United States, for instance, liberate their Jewish organizations, liberate their synagogues. If they're not willing to have this direct fight with the Zionists amongst them, then it is possible for them to go down to Palestine. And even if they don't want to carry arms against the Zionists, they can put themselves at risk. They can do something like the Salt March of India against the, they can go in the tens of the thousands to the gates of Gaza, do an opposite of the return march that the Palestinians were shot and killed, knowing that there will be the risk of them being shot and killed by the Zionists, by the Israelis. These are the minimum things that could be done. Our brothers and sisters that are not Jewish, they're not Palestinians, they're not Arab, they're basically the vast majority of Americans. You also have the same possibilities of going and occupying, like Palestine Action does, the war factories and destroying them, putting yourself in the way, even at the risk of being killed, even if you don't want to carry arms. In fact, it would be ideal if you force the American state to start killing its own citizens to defend the Zionist colony in this way, in these violent ways, if putting yourself in some kind of like this Salt March of India situation where people are ready to be beaten to death in front of the cameras of the world. Anything below that is insignificant at this point because we have no more international law. There is none. Every agency and norms that we created after World War II do not exist right now. And only direct action is going to change the realities.
I want to thank our panelists one more time. So let's give it up for Laith Marouf, for Hamid Shahrabi, and for Amr. Thank you so much. And we're just going to close out with an announcement. We have a rally and a march that is happening next Saturday, May 3rd. It's going to be in Astoria, Queens. This is going to be a rally that is in solidarity with the armed struggle in Palestine and with the axis of resistance. We're asking for folks to bring flags, banners, noisemakers, and let's show our support and solidarity with the armed struggle. The only way that Palestine will be liberated, as we heard from our panelists, it's not going to be liberated, unfortunately, through art shows. All right. No, I'm sorry to say that. It just won't. It will be liberated through the armed struggle that is happening right now in West Asia, and we need to show our support. And thank you very much. We'll see you there.